Hello, I'm Jeff Saperstein, a career transition coach and instructor at San Francisco State University. Today I'm going to be talking about listening skills, and hopefully you will be able to understand different ways of listening. And if you study this, you may improve your professional as well as your personal relationships, and certainly your leadership skills. Most people think that the person who controls a meeting is the person who's speaking. Actually, the person who guides a meeting and has more control of the conversation is the person who listens and then responds. So today I am going to be focusing on skill sets that you can use not only to improve your communications listening, but for you to be able to critique and understand how others are communicating with you as well. This is not about controlling, this is about guiding, and for you to be far more skilled and far more focused on how you can be more effective as a communicator. Now I'm going to divide these listening skills into two sets. One I'm going to call catabolic. Catabolic means that we take energy from the conversation, from the individual, and that we create a situation of either conflict or shutting conversation down. Catabolic is neither good nor bad, it just is. However, if we understand that the result of catabolic listening and catabolic speaking will create distance from your communications and create perhaps blocks, then you can avoid some of these or at least recognize them when you see it in others' behavior. The other set is anabolic. Anabolic provides energy. Anabolic provides opportunity. Anabolic opens conversation so that you're more effective both in someone listening to you and you listening to them in a constructive way that comes to agreement, comes to better relationship. And if you can master some of these anabolic techniques and understand the catabolic techniques, you will be in a much better position to be a great communicator. So let's start with anabolic and talk about something that's called active listening. Active listening. Here you're listening for an accurate perception of the sender's message. You ask for clarification, concisely paraphrasing without parroting a speaker's remarks. You can ask the speaker to rephrase a statement, and waiting out pauses as a speaker will often expand their ideas. In active listening, we try to put ourselves into the position of the other person, non-judgmentally, not finishing their sentences for them, but rather listening for clarification and then showing great interest. So if someone in a meeting is suggesting to you that there's a certain action that they're recommending, rather than judging it yes, no, or bad idea, good idea, ask them to talk about some of the ideas behind the recommendation. Ask them to talk about clarifying some of the evidence they provide. Ask them what they consider to be options that were not considered or not presented. In other words, you're looking in active listening to expand the conversation in a way that shows the listener that you are not only curious, not only understanding them, but engaged with them. So active listening is a very important part of our toolbox. Part of active listening is informational listening. Here, we are Asking to clarify information. If you see a chart, talk about or ask about what it is that is important about that particular number. If somebody is talking in an interview, you want to probe when they had a situation, how did they react to that situation, and what were the results, and what were they thinking, and what were the other people thinking, and look at informational listening as part of active listening, in which you're seeking information, data, support, statistics, anecdotes, again, showing your interest in understanding the speaker. You are not giving your opinion in either active or informational listening. You are trying to clarify, you're trying to understand. Emotional listening is where you're picking up on the energy of the speaker with empathy. Their feelings, their consciousness, how are they feeling about what they're saying? So, for example, if I say to students in my class, I'm going to give you quizzes on material that I think is important for you to learn, I'm giving that with a fairly straightforward emotion in terms of them learning the information and being able to absorb it. If I say, I'm giving these quizzes because I found that students do not listen in class, and unless I give a quiz, they are not going to pay attention, well, you can hear in my voice that I have some anger, I have some history, I have some reason that I feel that giving quizzes are perhaps a necessary evil. And when we listen for emotion, we could then probe in active listening, say, well, teacher, why do you feel so strongly about quizzes? Or what is the focus of your quiz in terms of what you're trying to achieve? Emotional listening is very important in that we are trying to understand the feelings, the awareness, the consciousness, the story behind the activity. Intuitive listening is connecting the dots, making an intuitive leap to interpret what the speaker is meaning to say or may not realize. You focus on similarities and contradictions of what the speaker has said to find the truth or interpretation that provides insight. So in information, we're looking for data, we're looking for evidence. In intuitive listening, we're looking for intuition. So I may sense that someone feels nervous or inadequate, or that they're somehow not good enough. And if I'm a coach, I will explore what they have said to me and connect the dots of their different experiences to suggest that there is a connection between their feeling of inadequacy or their feeling of not being good enough and how they're reacting when they're challenged or critiqued. So rather than say you're defensive and you're not taking criticism properly, my intuitive listening would inquire as, I hear you had these different circumstances where you felt attacked when you were critiqued. Do you consider that maybe this is something that is part of your own consciousness, your own experience that triggers this? And therefore, you create an intuitive leap. This is a very effective way of taking all this anabolic listening and pulling it together for insight to understand meaning and purpose. Well, let's move to catabolic. So many of us, both unconsciously and perhaps consciously, use these catabolic listening techniques, or we are engaged with people who do, and we kind of fall into patterns. So one is critical listening. Critical listening, evaluating the merits and demerits of a speaker's idea. Imagine you're in a meeting, you come up with an idea for improving whatever processes or whatever service your business is in, and the supervisor or the person who's leading the meeting says, bad idea, or we've tried that, didn't work. Well, what you've just done as a speaker is you've shut down that individual. You have not open discussion, but closed discussion. When we are in our personal relationships, when we're critical of somebody and they feel attacked, they shut down. So critical listening, unfortunately, is the most common in response to a dialogue. Now, it's different than giving a critique. A critique is different than critical listening. A critique can be, I'm going to make this suggestion for your improvement. Here's what I liked about what you did, and here's something you might consider, or some other ways you might consider approaching the same problem, the same issue. Or it may be that let's talk about how you can improve performance in a particular area where there has been errors or perhaps there's room for improvement. It's the difference between a constructive critique and critical thinking is your attitude about opening discussion with the person or shutting down their ideas, and thereby they retreat. Pseudo-listening. Pseudo-listening is where we pretend to listen. We're certainly looking at the speaker, but we're not really listening. Our heads are somewhere else, or we've already concluded and we're just letting them go on and on. So non-verbally we exhibit attentive listening, but mentally we're not processing the content of what the speaker is saying. Very often in conversation, people will be pseudo-listening. Very often in meetings, people will be pseudo-listening. Need I say that very often in classes, students are pseudo-listening to what an instructor has to say. But what pseudo-listening does is it actually also shuts down communication, because you're not getting the full value of what the speaker has to say, and you're not engaging the speaker, and indeed you're withdrawing. So being aware of our pseudo-listening is a good thing to do so that we avoid it, unless we truly don't want to listen. Sidetracking is changing the direction of a dialogue based on egocentric concerns or the agenda of the listener. Changing the subject by not allowing the full dimension of a topic to be explored really takes the attention from the other speaker and brings it to you. So if someone is talking about their experience at work and you say, oh yes, I have that experience too, and you take the discussion to your experience and disregard their experience, well, you're sidetracking. If you're speaking with someone and they're talking about a problem they are having with an individual, and you talk about the same problem you had with a similar type of individual, you're sidetracking. So if we want to focus on the other, we need to take our ego out of this discussion and focus on what they are saying and their feelings and fully explore it before we move on. And we usually should ask some permission, like, oh, have I heard you fully, and now can I respond? Or can I tell you my story? Would be a way to avoid sidetracking. Premature replying. Cutting off the speaker before she or he has completed an idea, thus diminishing the importance of an initial speaker's statement. Some of this is cultural. There are some places where everybody is interrupting you because they already understand what you were going to say and they don't need to hear you finish the sentence or finish the paragraph. Premature replying also cuts off when someone is saying something and we want to disagree, and we cut them off and then present our point of view. And sometimes debate happens with premature replying, where we don't let the other person finish because we want to score points. Obviously, this creates conflict. This creates a situation of avoidance by the other party of wanting to engage with you. Defensive listening. How many of us find ourselves in this situation? Someone is hostile or making a criticism of us or saying something we don't like, or maybe a political opinion that we disagree with, and we reply with a hostile tone, often encouraging that initial speaker to respond in kind. And you have an escalation, negative emotions in a communications exchange, and communications are reflective. If someone is saying something that you don't agree with, if someone is making a statement that you feel is inappropriate, perhaps you can step back and, rather than defensive listening and attacking the person, question their assumptions. Why do they feel that way? What in their experience has led them to have this belief? Use the active listening and informational listening as a way to deflect falling into defensive listening. So to sum up, we have anabolic ways of listening, and if we understand each and we master each, we will become much better communicators. If we take a look at catabolic listening and we understand the dynamics, we can both have better control of ourselves and recognize this in others, and we have the opportunity to not just react the way we would do kind of a knee-jerk reaction, but we can step back. We can take a moment and reflect, and we can say, what choices do we have? What is our objective in this conversation? And sometimes criticism is warranted, but we don't have to be critical in tearing people down. We don't always have to be attentive to what everybody says, but we can check ourselves whether or not we're pseudo-listening. Sidetracking, taking the conversation from what somebody is saying to what we want to say about ourselves, may be perfectly normal. It may be what we do all the time, but now we can reflect and say, is that the way I really want to be perceived as a communicator? Premature replying and cutting people off, that may be part of what we experience in our families or in our previous relationships, but maybe it will not work for us moving forward, and we check ourselves there and watch the tone of defensive listening. Hope this has been useful for you. This PowerPoint will be available with this presentation, and I hope that you check out my website, jeffsaperstein.com, for other blog posts, podcasts, videos, and more information about how you can navigate your career and be more successful as a communicator. Thank you.